The air in the billing department of Oak Ridge Premium Healthcare always smelled like a sickening mix of bleach and expensive artificial vanilla air freshener. It was a cold, sterile, an entirely unforgiving place. I sat in a stiff, uncomfortable leather chair that felt entirely too big for me, my hands trembling as I clutched a crumpled stack of medical invoices. I was exhausted, the kind of bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion that only comes from working 3 minimum-wage jobs and sleeping in hospital waiting rooms. Across the heavy mahogany desk sat Brenda. Brenda was the chief billing administrator, a title she wore like a crown of thorns meant entirely for other people. She had perfectly manicured acrylic nails that clacked obnoxiously against her keyboard, heavily sprayed hair that didn't move when she turned her head, and a permanent, condescending sneer painted across her face. She was the gatekeeper to my mother's survival, and she knew it. She relished it. "Look, sweetie," Brenda sighed, her voice dripping with venomous pity as she didn't even bother to look up from her monitor. "I don't think you're grasping the reality of your situation. This is Oak Ridge Premium. We are a world-class facility. We do not run a charity ward. Your mother's latest round of treatments has racked up an outstanding balance of $84. Ling, and you are sitting here, in my office, asking me to approve a $20 a month payment plan." She let out a sharp, mocking laugh that echoed in the quiet office. "What is this? A layaway program at a thrift store? At $20 a month, you wouldn't even cover the interest in 3 lifetimes. Please, Brenda, ibegel." My voice cracking as I swallowed my pride. I hated begging, but I had exactly $43 left in my checking account. I was wearing a faded Anna Law, oversized sweater I bought at Goodwill, and my sneakers were practically falling apart at the seams. "I just need a little more time. I picked up a third shift, cleaning offices downtown. I can maybe do $50 next month. Just please, don't cut off her care. She's in the middle of the protocol. If you stop the treatments now, if we stop the treatments now, we stop losing money on a delinquent account." Brenda interrupted coldly, finally making eye contact. Her eyes were dead, devoid of any human empathy. "Let me be crystal clear with you. I am rejecting this payment plan. Furthermore, I am flagging your account for immediate collection. By tomorrow morning, I am authorizing our most aggressive third-party debt recovery agency to take over." My heart dropped into my stomach. "No, please. You can't do that. We rent a tiny apartment. If they start harassing us, my landlord will evict us. My mother is hooked up to oxygen. She can't be out on the street." Brenda leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands, a cruel smile playing on her lips. "Then you should have thought about that before bringing her to a hospital you clearly couldn't afford. The collectors will seize whatever meager assets you have. Cars, bank accounts, furniture. I don't care. Now, before I have security escort you out for loitering, I'm going to run a hard global financial sweep on your social security number. It's standard procedure for accounts going into aggressive collections. It pulls from federal banking registries, investment portfolios, and real estate databases. We need to make sure you aren't hiding a secret little savings account somewhere." "I'm not hiding anything," I pleaded, tears finally spilling over my eyelashes. "I swear to you, I have nothing. Check whatever you want." "Oh, I will," she sneered, her acrylic nails violently striking the keys as she typed in my information. "And when it comes back showing exactly what I suspect, that you are completely financially insolvent, I will personally sign the eviction and collection orders. You people always think you can game the system." She hit the enter key with a dramatic flourish. The system took a moment to load. The little blue circle on her screen spun. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I sat there bracing myself for the final nail in my coffin, staring down at my worn-out shoes, waiting for her to announce my utter financial ruin. But the announcement never came. Instead, the obnoxious clacking of her keyboard suddenly stopped. The silence in the room became absolute, thick, and suffocating. I slowly raised my head. Brenda was staring at her computer monitor. Her posture, which just seconds ago had been arrogant and imposing, had completely collapsed. She was frozen, her mouth slightly ajar. "Brenda," I whispered nervously. She didn't respond. The color was rapidly draining from her face, leaving her foundation looking like a pale mask. A bead of sweat actually formed at her hairline. Hint, the same hand that had confidently hovered over the mouse to ruin my life, began to tremble uncontrollably. She took off her expensive designer reading glasses with a shaky hand, wiped them on her silk blouse, and shoved them back onto her face, leaning inches from the screen. She blinked rapidly, her breath catching in her throat. She hit the refresh button. The screen pinged again. "Ça me résulte." She hit it again. And again. Her breathing became shallow and erratic. Is the system broken?" I asked, terrified that she was going to blame me for a computer virus. Brenda slowly turned her head to look at me. The malicious, mocking predator from 2 minutes ago was completely gone. In her place was a woman who looked like she had just seen a ghost, or worse, looked into the eyes of a god she had just deeply offended. "Ma'am," she croaked, her voice barely a whisper. She actually swallowed hard, trying to moisten a suddenly dry throat. She didn't call me sweetie. She called me ma'am. There must be. I don't. "Brenda." "What is it?" I asked, my anxiety peaking. "Are you sending the collectors?" "Collectors," she squeaked, her voice cracking in pure, unadulterated terror. She practically recoiled from me, pressing her back against her leather chair as if I were radiating heat. "Miss, your verified global liquid assets. They aren't zero. The Federal Registry, it's showing a cleared, verified balance, sitting in a private Tier 1 trust under your name." She had to stop to catch her breath, her eyes wide, with a mixture of awe and absolute horror. "It says your current available cash balance is $312,450,000. I just stared at her, the words completely failing to process in my exhausted brain. 312 million. Before I explain how a girl eating 99-cent instant ramen for dinner and wearing thrift store shoes suddenly had the net worth of a Fortune 500 CEO sitting casually in a checking account, hit that subscribe button, because this story of ultimate revenge is about to get insane. Par deux, the modest life and the disrespect. To understand how truly insane it was to hear Brenda, a woman who usually looked at me like I was something she had scraped off the bottom of her expensive high heels, stutter out the words $312 million. You have to understand the absolute hell my life had been up until that exact second. Just 3 days before that surreal moment in the billing office, I was standing in the freezing aisle of a discount grocery store, having a silent panic attack over a $2.50 box of off-brand oatmeal. My life for the past 8 months had been a relentless, suffocating nightmare of poverty and fear. My mother, the only family I had left in the world, had been diagnosed with a rare respiratory illness. The doctors at Oak Ridge Premium Healthcare, the only facility in the state equipped to handle her specific condition, told us the treatment protocol had a high success rate. They also told us it would cost a fortune. We had drained her meager retirement savings in the first 3 weeks. After that, we sold her car. Then we sold her jewelry. Then we moved out of our comfortable duplex and into a tiny place into a drafty, 1-bedroom apartment situated above a noisy 2-4-hour laundromat. The constant rumbling of the washing machines downstairs vibrated through the floorboards, serving as a relentless soundtrack to my insomnia. I was 24 years old, running on 3 hours of sleep a night, and working 3 grueling minimum wage jobs just to keep my mother's oxygen machine plugged into a wall that had electricity. My mornings started at 4:30 a.m. at a greasy spoon diner. I spent 8 hours carrying heavy trays of bacon and eggs, smiling until my jaw ached at grumpy truckers and impatient businessmen, just hoping they would leave a crumpled dollar bill on the table instead of spare change. I smelled permanently of stale fryer grease and cheap coffee. By 2:00 p.m., I would sprint to my second job stocking shelves at a local pharmacy, heavily lifting boxes of detergent and dog food until my back screamed in agony. And finally, at 4 p.m., when most people were crawling into their warm beds, I was putting on a scratchy blue uniform and pushing a janitorial cart through the polished, silent corridors of a downtown corporate law firm. I spent my nights scrubbing toilets, emptying trash cans full of discarded luxury lunch wrappers, and vacuuming plush carpets I could never afford to walk on during business hours. I lived on a strict diet of 9-9, sent instant ramen noodles and the half-eaten dinner rolls the cooks at the diner let me take home. I hoarded pennies in a plastic jar. I turned off the apartment heater in the dead of winter, layering myself in 4 sweaters, just so I could save $30. 0 on the utility bill to put toward my mother's prescriptions. But no matter how many toilets I scrubbed or how many shifts I pulled, it was never enough. The medical bills didn't just pile up, they cascaded over us like a devastating avalanche. Every trip to the mailbox brought another aggressively red envelope from Oak Ridge Premium Healthcare. And the face of that nightmare was Brenda. Brenda wasn't just doing her job as an administrator. She was a woman who actively weaponized her tiny sliver of corporate power to punish those she deemed beneath her. She thrived on the desperation of the poor. The true depth of Brenda's cruelty was fully displayed just 1 week before our meeting in her office. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had taken a rare hour off work to push my mother in her wheelchair to the hospital for her scheduled infusion. My mother was incredibly frail that day. Her skin pale, a clear plastic oxygen tube resting under her nose. We were waiting by the elevators in the lavish Dreamses, marble-floored main lobby of the hospital. The area was crowded with wealthy patients, visiting doctors, and hospital executives. Suddenly, I heard the sharp, unmistakable clacking of Brenda's heels echoing across the marble. She marched straight toward us, a thick file clutched in her hands. Her eyes locked onto us like a hawk spotting wounded prey. Excuse me. We have a major problem here," Brenda announced, her voice intentionally loud enough to make heads turn. "Brenda, please. My mother is exhausted," I whispered, stepping between her and the wheelchair. "Can we talk about this later?" "No, we cannot talk about this later," she snapped, stepping around me to glare directly at my fragile mother. She waved the billing file in the air like a weapon. "Your account is officially 30 days past due for the second time this quarter. You owe us $14. 2,000 for last month's infusions alone. The system has automatically locked your patient ID." A few well-dressed people in the lobby stopped and stared, whispering to each other. I felt a hot flush of deep, burning humiliation creep up my neck. "I'm working on it," I pleaded, my voice shaking as I tried to shield my mother from the public spectacle. "I just got a 3rd job. I'll have a payment by Friday. I promise." "She needs this infusion today. Brenda, please." Brenda let out a theatrical sigh, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling as if asking the heavens for patience. She looked down at my mother, who was now quietly weeping into her hands, utterly humiliated by the public shaming. "This is Oak Ridge Premium, not a downtown free clinic," Brenda said loudly, ensuring the entire lobby could hear her verdict. "We do not run a charity ward for leeches on the healthcare system who refuse to pay their debts. You are clogging up the lobby and wasting our premium resources. If you don't have the money, you don't get the medicine. It's that simple. Now turn that wheelchair around and leave this facility before I have security. Remove you for trespassing." She stood there, arms crossed, a smug, satisfied smirk playing on her lips, watching as I had to turn my mother's wheelchair around in front of dozens of staring strangers. I wheeled my sobbing mother out of the hospital and into the freezing rain, feeling a level of powerlessness and rage that burned a hole straight through my soul. It was that exact desperation, the agonizing fear of watching my mother deteriorate without her treatments, that had forced me to swallow every ounce of my pride and march into Brenda's office 3 days later. I had gone in there fully prepared to beg on my hands and knees for a pathetic $20 a month payment plan, bracing myself for her venom. And that is exactly why, when Brenda sat there in her fancy leather chair, trembling, sweating, and stuttering out the words $312 million, my brain completely and utterly short-circuited. Par trois, the VIP room and the revelation. I sat frozen in the stiff leather chair, the air in the billing office suddenly feeling too thin to breathe. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a harsh, electric hum that sounded deafening in the absolute silence that had swallowed the room. I stared at Brenda. Brenda stared at her monitor. The woman who, just minutes ago, had looked at me with the cold, detached superiority of an executioner, was now physically malfunctioning. Her chest heaved as she took shallow, panicked breaths. The foundation on her face, usually an immaculate, poreless mask, seemed to be cracking as her skin paled underneath it. A visible drop of sweat broke free from her heavily hairsprayed bangs and rolled down her temple. "Brenda," I managed to squeak out, my voice barely audible over the hammering of my own heart. What did you just say?" She didn't answer me. Hen, trembling so violently that her acrylic nails clattered against the plastic casing of her mouse, reached out and slammed the refresh button on her global financial sweep software again, and again, and again, every single time. The screen flashed with the exact same impossible data. "Oh my God," Brenda choked out, a sound that was half gasp, half sob. "Oh my sweet lord. You. Before I could ask another question, Brenda lunged for her desk phone. She didn't dial the internal extension for the security desk to have me thrown out, as she had so gleefully promised. Instead, her shaking fingers punched in a 4-digit emergency override code. "Mr. Sterling." She practically squeaked into the receiver, her voice pitched an octave higher than normal. "It's Brenda. In billing? Sir, you need to come down here." No. I know you are in a board meeting, but you need to pull up the Federal Registry for patient guarantor." She frantically read off my social security number. There was a pause. I couldn't hear what the man on the other end said, but I watched Brenda's face contort into sheer terror. "Yes, sir. It's real. The Tier 1 verification just cleared. She's sitting right in front of me." "Yes, sir." Right away. She slammed the phone down as if it had burned her. She looked at me, but she wasn't making eye contact. She was looking through me, like she was witnessing an oncoming train. Less than 60 seconds later, the heavy glass doors of the billing department burst open. 2 massive, broad-shouldered security guards strode in, their radios crackling. My stomach violently plummeted to the floor. This is it, I thought, sheer panic flooding my veins. The system glitched. They think I hacked their network. They think I'm a fraud. I'm going to federal prison, and my mom is going to die alone. I immediately shot up from my chair, my hands raised in surrender. "I didn't do anything," I cried out, tears of sheer terror welling in my eyes. "I swear to God. I have $43 in my account. I don't know what her computer says, but it's a mistake. Please, just let me leave." The guards didn't grab my arms. They didn't pull out handcuffs. Instead, they stopped a respectful 5 feet away, their postures stiff and oddly deferential. "Ma'am," the larger guard said, his voice entirely devoid of the aggression I expected. In fact, he sounded nervous. "Please, don't be alarmed. Mr. Sterling, the Chief Financial Officer, has requested your presence in the executive suite. If you would kindly follow us, we are here to escort you safely." I looked back at Brenda. She was pressed as far back into her chair as physically possible, looking at me as if I held the codes to nuclear launch missiles. My legs felt like lead, but I followed the guards. They didn't march me toward the exit. Instead, they led me to a private, keycard-only elevator hidden behind a frosted glass partition. When the doors slid open, I stepped inside. We bypassed the regular patient floors entirely, shooting straight up to the penthouse level. The doors dinged, opening into a world I had only ever seen in movies. The air up here didn't smell like bleach and vanilla. It smelled like rich mahogany, fresh orchids, and immense, untouchable wealth. The floors were covered in plush, imported Persian rugs that I suddenly felt incredibly guilty stepping on with my scuffed, mud-stained thrift store sneakers. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking 4-4 panoramic view of the entire city. A tall, silver-haired man in a bespoke, 3-piece Italian suit was pacing frantically in front of a massive oak desk. The second he saw me, he froze, rapidly smoothing his silk tie before rushing forward with an outstretched hand. "Miss Davis, thank heavens," he said, his voice dripping with an unnatural, sycophantic warmth that completely clashed with his panicked eyes. "I am Arthur Sterling, the Chief Financial Officer and Acting Director of Oak Ridge Premium. Please, please, come in. Have a seat." He gestured to a white leather couch that looked like it cost more than I made in 3 years. I sat down awkwardly, sinking into the plush material, clutching my faded Goodwill sweater tightly around myself. "Mr. Sterling, please." Evict, my voice shaking uncontrollably. "I don't know what is going on. I'm a janitor. I'm a waitress. I am trying to pay for my mother's oxygen. If your system says I have money, it's a glitch. Or identity theft. Maybe a cartel is using my social security number to launder drug money. You have to call the police. I am completely innocent." Mr. Sterling let out a breathless, nervous chuckle, rushing over to a crystal decanter and pouring me a glass of sparkling water with hands that were visibly vibrating. He practically shoved the crystal glass into my hand. No, Ms. Davis. Please, breathe. There is no cartel. There is no system glitch," he said, his voice dropping into a hushed, reverent whisper. "Oak Ridge utilizes the direct federal clearinghouse for our high-level asset sweeps. It communicates directly with the Federal Reserve, the SEC, and international Tier 1 trusts. It does not glitch. It requires 3 layers of biometric and encrypted verification to display a positive asset load of this magnitude." He walked over to his desk, picked up a sleek, silver laptop, and brought it over to the glass coffee table in front of me. He turned the screen to face me. "We ran the sweep because of the aggressive nature of our collections department, which I deeply apologize for." Sterling stammered, sweating profusely under the collar of his expensive shirt. But when Brenda hit the query, it pinged a newly activated, irrevocable blind trust that was fully liquidated and wired into a holding account under your exact legal name and social security number just 6 hours ago. I stared at the screen. The background was a stark official government seal. At the top, my full name was printed in bold black letters, and directly underneath it, highlighted in a bright, blinding green, was the available liquid cash balance. 312美元. 450. Ling 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 ling. I felt the blood rush out of my head. The room started to spin. 300. I couldn't even form the words. My brain violently rejected the numbers. $312,450,000. Mr. Sterling read aloud, his voice cracking with a mixture of profound awe and deep, institutional fear. He was looking at me like I was royalty. "Miss Davis, you are not a janitor anymore. As of 3:00 a.m. this morning, you are one of the wealthiest private individuals in this state." But how I gasped. The crystal glass shaking in my hand so badly that water sloshed over the rim and onto the white leather. "From who this is impossible. I don't know any rich people. I have no family left except my mom." Mr. Sterling quickly pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his brow. "That is precisely what we intend to find out. Because 5 minutes after your asset sweep triggered our system, my office received a call." He pointed to the flashing red light on his massive desk phone. "There is a team of elite corporate attorneys from a very powerful firm in New York currently waiting on hold," Sterling said, swallowing hard. "They have been tracking the wire transfer, waiting for you to surface. They are ready to explain everything. Par 4. Uncovering the origin. I stared at the blinking red light on Mr. Sterling's multi-line mahogany desk phone. It flashed with a rhythmic, urgent pulse, like a heartbeat. The CFO of Oak Ridge Premium Healthcare, a man who probably made 7 figures a year, was standing next to it, wiping his forehead with a silk handkerchief, waiting for my permission to answer his own phone. I took a slow, deep breath, trying to steady the violent shaking of my hands. I placed the crystal glass of water down on the table. "Answer it," I whispered. Sterling scrambled to press the speakerphone button. The line clicked, and a deep, impeccably smooth voice filled the opulent room. "Arthur, is she there? Has she been secured?" the voice asked. It carried the unmistakable, sharp cadence of a New York corporate elite. Yes, Mr. Vance, Sterling replied, his voice trembling slightly. Ms. Davis is sitting right here with me in the executive suite. Excellent, the voice said, shifting slightly. Miss Davis, my name is Jonathan Vance. I am a senior partner at Vanguard, Hayes and Abernathy, a wealth management and corporate law firm based in Manhattan. First and foremost, let me assure you that you are not in trouble. You are not under investigation, and the funds displaying in your federal registry are 100% legal, verified, and entirely yours. I squeezed my eyes shut, rubbing my temples. Mr. Vance, with all due respect, you have the wrong person. I clean toilets for a living. I am currently trying to negotiate a $20 a month payment plan so my mother doesn't die. I don't have $300 million. You do as of 3:00 a.m. this morning. Miss Davis, Vance replied calmly, devoid of any doubt. Allow me to explain. Do you recall your maternal grandfather, Harrison Miller? I blinked, genuinely thrown off by the name. My grandfather, I haven't seen him since I was 10. He was eccentric. He cut ties with our family decades ago and moved out west. He died about 4 years ago. The state sent us a letter, but we couldn't even afford to fly out for a funeral. Precisely, Vance continued. Harrison Miller was indeed a reclusive man. When he passed, his estate was virtually non-existent, save for one asset. He left you, his only living grandchild, a deed to roughly 6,000 acres of entirely undeveloped, barren desert land in Nye County, Nevada. It was a patch of dirt essentially in the middle of nowhere. Assessed value at the time of his death was practically zero. We sent you the deed 3 years ago. I racked my brain. Vaguely, through the fog of exhaustion and medical trauma, I remembered receiving a thick envelope from a county clerk years ago. I had opened it. I saw it was for a patch of wasteland that carried a few $100s in annual property taxes, and threw it in the trash. I couldn't afford to pay taxes on dirt. I threw it away. I admitted quietly. It was just desert. It was just desert, Vance corrected, a hint of a smile bleeding into his professional tone. Until 8 months ago, when geologists conducting deep-core soil surveys for a federal mapping project made a discovery. Miss Davis, that worthless patch of dirt your grandfather left you happens to sit directly on top of the single largest, highest-grade untapped lithium deposit ever discovered in North America. The room went dead silent. Mr. Sterling stopped wiping his brow, his mouth hanging slightly open. Lithium, I echoed, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. We are in the middle of a global battery arms race. Miss Davis, Vance explained, his voice turning deadly serious. Electric vehicles, smartphones, defense tech. Lithium is the new gold. And you own the motherlode. Once the geological surveys leaked, it triggered a covert bidding war among the world's largest tech and mining conglomerates. So they bought the land, I asked. My brain still struggling to process the scale of what was happening. They bypassed the negotiation phase entirely out of sheer desperation. Vance said, at 2:45 a.m. today, Atlas Global Mining Corporation, a trillion-dollar conglomerate, executed a preemptive, non-refundable cash buyout for the exclusive 99-year surface and mineral extraction rights. They didn't want to risk you talking to their competitors, so they aggressively wired the maximum premium directly into a blind trust we established in your name. He paused, letting the silence hang for a moment to ensure I was listening to every single syllable. The $312,450,000 currently sitting in your checking account is not your total net worth, Miss Davis. That is merely the upfront, instant signing bonus. You will also be receiving a 7% gross royalty on every ounce of lithium extracted for the next century. You are, quite literally, a billionaire in the making. I leaned back against the plush white leather of the sofa. The ceiling of the executive suite seemed to warp and spin. A billionaire. Yesterday, I had carefully glued the sole of my left sneaker back together so my sock wouldn't get wet in the rain. I had split a single hard-boiled egg in half so I could have lunch and dinner. I had cried in a hospital stairwell because I was $40 short on the electric bill. And now, I owned a lithium empire. The sheer absurdity of it made a hysterical, broken laugh bubble up in my throat. I covered my face with my hands, my shoulders shaking. I wasn't crying from sadness. I was crying from the violent release of years of crushing, suffocating pressure. We are safe, my brain screamed. My mom is going to live. We are safe. Ms. Davis Vance asked gently over the speaker. Are you all right? I lowered my hands. I took a deep breath. The panicked, exhausted girl who had walked into this hospital begging for scraps was gone. She evaporated right there on that white leather couch, replaced by a cold, sharp, and terrifyingly calm clarity. I am perfectly fine, Mr. Vance, I said, my voice steady, stripped of all its previous trembling. What are my next steps? My team is flying out to your city on a private jet as we speak, Vance replied efficiently. We will be there by tomorrow morning to handle the paperwork, set up your security detail, and structure your wealth management. Until then, your funds are completely liquid and accessible. You have a black card overnighted to you. Do you need us to handle any immediate financial burdens, medical debts? Perhaps. I slowly turned my head to look at Mr. Sterling. The CFO flinched slightly under my gaze. He was looking at me, the way a peasant looks at an empress. Mr. Sterling, I said, my tone eerily calm. How much, exactly, is my mother's outstanding balance? Zero. Absolutely zero. Miss Davis. Sterling stammered instantly, waving his hands in a panic. Oakridge Premium is fully comping your mother's entire stay. All past debts are forgiven. She will be moved to the VIP penthouse recovery suite immediately, free of charge. Please, consider it a courtesy from the hospital. He was terrified. He knew that with one phone call, I could buy the land his house sat on and bulldoze it for fun. No, I replied softly. I pay my debts, Mr. Sterling, every single penny. But I have a condition. Anything, he practically begged. Namit. I stood up from the couch. I smoothed down my faded Goodwill sweater, feeling a sudden, dark sense of amusement at my own reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. I want you to place a maximum security lock on my financial file in your system. Level 5 encryption, I instructed, my eyes locking onto the CFO's terrified face. When Brenda in billing checks my file tomorrow, I want it to say exactly what she expected it to say. I want it to show that I am completely broke, insolvent, that today was just a bizarre software glitch. Sterling blinked, utterly confused. But Ms. Davis, why? You are one of the most powerful people in this building right now. Why would you let that horrid woman think you are still destitute? A slow, icy smile spread across my face. Because, I whispered, the memory of Brenda humiliating my crying mother in the lobby burning fiercely in my mind. I want to see exactly how cruel she is willing to be when she thinks she has all the power, and then, I'm going to take everything from her. Bar 5. The test. The next morning, the washing machines in the 2 4-hour laundromat below my apartment rumbled to life at 5. A null honol am, vibrating the thin floorboards beneath my mattress. For the past 8 months, that sound had been the soundtrack to my misery, a daily alarm clock reminding me of my inescapable poverty. But today, it sounded entirely different. Today, I lay in the dark, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, and smiled. Inside the pocket of my threadbare winter coat, resting on the wobbly kitchen table, was a sleek, heavy, matte black titanium card. Jonathan Vance's team had arrived in the city via private jet at 2:00 am. They had handed me the card along with a portfolio of offshore trust documents. As a temporary courtesy, while the massive corporate acquisition accounts were being structured, Vance had loaded the black card with a petty cash advance of $5. Ling 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 ling. 00. I had $5 million sitting in my coat pocket. Yet I deliberately reached past it to grab my faded Goodwill sweater. I slid my feet into the same scuffed sneakers I had worn yesterday. The ones with the soles carefully glued back together. I tied my hair into a messy bun, skipped makeup, and made sure I looked exactly like the exhausted, desperate girl who was one missed paycheck away from total ruin. It was time for the test. When I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the Oak Ridge Premium Healthcare Billing Department, the sterile scent of bleach and artificial vanilla hit me. The waiting area was empty. I walked straight up to the mahogany desk at the back of the room. Brenda was there, sipping an artisanal iced latte and aggressively typing on her keyboard. When she heard my footsteps, she looked up. For a fraction of a second, a flash of genuine, residual terror crossed her eyes. The memory of yesterday's heart-stopping number was still fresh in her mind. But then, as her eyes scanned my cheap clothes, my worn-out shoes, and my timid posture, her posture shifted. The fear evaporated, instantly replaced by a wave of profound, indignant arrogance. I cannot believe you actually have the audacity to show your face in this office again after the stunt you pulled yesterday, Brenda hissed, slamming her iced latte down on her desk so hard, the ice rattled. I slouched my shoulders, forcing my voice to tremble. Stunt, Brenda. I didn't do anything. You saw the screen. You saw what the system said. Brenda let out a sharp, venomous laugh that echoed off the sterile walls. Oh, please. Save the amateur acting for someone who cares. I spoke to the IT department first thing this morning. Do you know what happened? You little fraud. A catastrophic server routing error. The Federal Clearinghouse underwent a midnight software patch, and your pathetic little social security number got temporarily cross-wired with the holding accounts of a corporate hedge fund. She leaned over her desk, her eyes narrowing into cruel slits. For about 10 minutes yesterday, I actually thought you had pulled off the greatest financial crime in state history. I thought you had hacked us. But the system rebooted at 3:00 am. The encryption reset, and just to be absolutely certain, I ran your file again, the second I clocked in today. Brenda dramatically spun her monitor around to face me. She jabbed a sharp acrylic nail at the screen. There, under my name. The Level 5 encryption protocol that Mr. Sterling had personally installed at my command was working perfectly. The blinding green numbers from yesterday were gone. In their place, glaring in harsh red font, was my true balance. 43 Ling Ling. $43. Brenda spat, rolling the words around in her mouth like they tasted foul. You don't have $300 million. You don't even have enough to buy a decent tank of gas. You are exactly what I said you were. A broke, desperate leech trying to game a system designed for people infinitely better than you. I swallowed hard, forcing tears to well up in my eyes. It wasn't actually that difficult. I just had to remember how she had treated my mother in the lobby last week. Brenda, please. Evict. Letting my voice crack with perfectly calibrated desperation. You're right. I'm sorry about the glitch yesterday, but the reality is still the same. My mom's balance is $84. Ling 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 ling. I have 2 more shifts this week. I can give you $60 by Friday. Just please, don't send the debt collectors to our apartment. My landlord will evict us. My mom is on an oxygen concentrator. She can't survive on the streets. I watched her face closely, looking for a single, microscopic shred of human empathy. I wanted to see if there was any light inside this woman. Any boundary she wouldn't cross when faced with another human being's ultimate suffering. Instead, Brenda smiled. It was a terrifying, deeply satisfied smile. She was enjoying this. My pain was her morning entertainment. Let me stop you right there, Brenda said, her voice dripping with sadistic pleasure. I don't care if your mother takes her last gasping breath on the sidewalk. That is not an Oak Ridge Premium problem. That is a you problem. In fact, because of the massive waste of my time you caused yesterday with that little system glitch, I didn't just flag your account for collections. I expedited it. She reached into a file tray and pulled out a stack of red-stamped papers, tossing them onto the desk between us. I authorized the maximum asset seizure protocol at 8:00 a.m. today, she declared proudly. They aren't just going to garnish your minimum wage paychecks. They are going to seize your bank account, repo whatever garbage vehicle you drive, and legally compel your landlord to evict you for harboring a delinquent debtor. The wheels are already in motion. By Friday, you and your sick mother will be completely from Sime, legally, and financially erased. The silence in the room was deafening. I looked down at the red-stamped eviction notices. Then I looked back up at Brenda. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't beg anymore. Slowly, the timid, trembling posture I had been holding completely evaporated. I straightened my back, rolling my shoulders back as if lifting a heavy, invisible weight off my chest. The fake tears dried instantly. I looked at her not with fear, but with the cold, detached curiosity of a scientist observing an insect right before stepping on it. Brenda frowned, slightly unnerved by the sudden, drastic shift in my demeanor. "Did you not hear me? I said you're done. Get out of my office before I call security to drag you out." She reached for her phone to dial the guards. "You don't need to call them." "Brenda," I said. My voice was suddenly so calm, so terrifyingly steady, that Brenda's hand actually froze halfway to the receiver. "I know the way out." I turned around and began walking toward the glass doors. "That's right. Walk away," Brenda yelled after me, trying to regain her dominant footing. "Have a nice life in the gutter." I stopped at the doorway, my hand resting on the cool glass. I looked back over my shoulder. "Oh, I'll be seeing you very soon." "Brenda." I smiled, a chilling, genuine smile that made the color drain from her face just a fraction. "Make sure you dress nicely for the quarterly board meeting tomorrow. I hear there's going to be a massive restructuring in upper management." I pushed through the doors and walked out, leaving her staring after me in utter confusion. She had failed the test spectacularly, and now, I was going to burn her kingdom to the ground. Par six. The ultimate flex. The next morning at exactly 10:00 am. The atmosphere inside the grand boardroom on the penthouse floor of Oak Ridge Premium Healthcare was thick with the smell of freshly brewed espresso, expensive cologne, and corporate greed. Sitting around the massive, polished mahogany table were 12 of the highest-ranking executives and board members of the hospital group. At the far end of the room stood Brenda. She was in her element, wearing a sharp crimson blazer, aggressively clicking a laser pointer at a massive projection screen displaying quarterly financial charts. "As you can see, gentlemen," Brenda announced, her voice echoing with smug self-satisfaction, "my newly implemented zero-tolerance delinquency protocol in the billing department has been a resounding success. By aggressively expediting asset seizures and utilizing predatory third-party collectors within 24 hours of missed payments, we have squeezed an additional 12% out of our lower-income demographic." She clicked to the next slide, which showed a graph skyrocketing upward. "I don't care if they are on life support. I don't care if they have to sell their homes. We are Oak Ridge Premium. We do not subsidize charity cases. I have personally overseen the eviction and financial ruin of 3 delinquent guarantor accounts just this week. The system is flawless." Mr. Sterling, the chief financial officer, was sitting near the front. Unlike the rest of the board members who were nodding in greedy approval, Sterling looked physically ill. He was sweating profusely, his hands trembling as he stared at his vibrating phone, nervously glancing at the boardroom doors every few seconds. "Excellent work, Brenda," the aging chairman of the board praised, adjusting his gold Rolex. "It's about time we stopped letting these bottom feeders clog up our revenue streams." Next on the agenda, before the chairman could finish his sentence, the heavy double mahogany doors at the back of the boardroom didn't just open, they were violently pushed open. The heavy thud of the doors hitting the wall made every executive in the room jump. Brenda paused her presentation, her annoyed gaze snapping toward the entrance, ready to scold whoever had dared to interrupt her crowning moment. But the words died in her throat. I stepped into the boardroom. I was no longer wearing the faded Goodwill sweater or the scuffed, glued-together sneakers. I was wearing a pristine, custom-tailored, stark white Tom Ford power suit that cost more than Brenda's annual salary. My hair was blown out perfectly. My makeup was flawless and sharp, and my posture radiated the kind of untouchable, terrifying dominance that only comes with possessing immense, unimaginable wealth. Flanking me were Jonathan Vance and 3 other elite corporate attorneys from Manhattan, all carrying heavy leather briefcases and looking like literal apex predators. Brenda blinked, her brain completely short-circuiting. She recognized my face, but her mind simply could not reconcile the destitute, crying girl she had thrown to the debt collectors yesterday with the terrifyingly powerful woman standing before her now. "Excuse me," Brenda shrieked, her voice shrill with indignant fury, finally finding her voice. "Security, how did this vagrant get past the lobby? This is a highly classified executive meeting." She pointed her laser pointer at my chest, her hand shaking with rage. "You little psycho. I told you yesterday you were finished. I am calling the police to have you arrested for corporate trespassing." "Brenda, shut your mouth." The scream didn't come from me. It came from Mr. Sterling. The CFO shot up from his leather chair so fast it tipped over backwards, crashing onto the plush carpet. He was hyperventilating, his face practically purple as he looked at Brenda. "Shut your mouth immediately, or I swear to God I will have you thrown out of that window. Do not speak another word to her," Sterling roared, his voice cracking with pure, unadulterated panic. The entire boardroom froze. The chairman of the board stared at his CFO as if he had lost his mind. "Arthur, what is the meaning of this? Who is this woman?" I didn't wait for Sterling to answer. I walked slowly, deliberately, down the length of the massive mahogany table. The clacking of my designer heels on the hardwood perimeter echoed like gunshots in the dead silence. I didn't look at any of the men. I kept my eyes locked dead onto Brenda's face. I reached the head of the table. The chairman opened his mouth to object, but Jonathan Vance stepped forward, radiating absolute legal menace, and slammed a 3-inch thick, gold-embossed leather folder onto the table. It sounded like a judge's gavel. "Gentlemen of the board," Vance announced, his deep Manhattan baritone commanding the room. "My name is Jonathan Vance, senior partner at Vanguard, Hayes and Abernathy. I represent Miss Davis." He opened the folder, revealing heavily redacted financial documents carrying the official seals of the Federal Reserve and the SEC. At exactly 8:00 a.m. this morning, my client authorized a direct, non-refundable cash wire transfer of $185, ling 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 ling, 00, to quietly purchase out all Class A voting shares from your 3 largest institutional investors. This hostile takeover was finalized and legally recorded 10 minutes ago. Vance looked around the room, making eye contact with every stunned, pale-faced executive. Ms. Davis is now the owner of a 51% controlling stake in the Oak Ridge Premium Healthcare Group. As of this exact second, she is the supreme, unquestioned chairman of this board. You all work for her. The collective gasp in the room sucked all the oxygen out of the air. The former chairman collapsed back into his chair, clutching his chest. But it was Brenda's reaction that was the absolute masterpiece. The smug, cruel, superior sneer melted off her face like wax held to a blowtorch. Her mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air on a dry dock. The laser pointer slipped from her trembling fingers and clattered onto the floor. "No," Brenda whispered, her eyes darting wildly between me and Mr. Papadis. "Sterling. No, that's impossible. The system." It said $43. The glitch. The hedge fund routing error. There was no glitch. "Brenda," I said softly, leaning my hands on the mahogany table. My voice was calm, icy, and totally devoid of mercy. "I told Mr. Sterling to temporarily alter my display file to $43. I wanted to see what you would do. I gave you every opportunity to show a single shred of humanity. I begged you. I told you my mother was on an oxygen machine and we would be evicted. And you smiled. You told me you expedited our ruin." Brenda's knees visibly buckled. She grabbed the edge of the projector stand to keep from collapsing. Tears of absolute, primal terror began to stream through her heavy foundation, ruining her flawless makeup. "Miss Davis, please," Brenda choked out, her voice a pathetic, high-pitched whine. The woman who thrived on the desperation of others was now the most desperate creature in the room. "I was just doing my job. I didn't know. I have a mortgage. I have kids. Please. I don't care. I replied, throwing her exact words from yesterday back into her face. That is not an Oak Ridge Premium problem. That is a you problem. I turned to Vance. Mr. Vance, what did our forensic audit of Brenda's department uncover last night? Vance smiled a shark-like grin. We discovered that Brenda has been illegally inflating late fees on low-income accounts to trigger premature collections, earning kickbacks from the third-party debt recovery agencies. It is blatant fraud. Gross misconduct. I looked back at Brenda, whose face had gone completely deathly gray. Brenda, you are fired. Effective immediately, I stated, my voice echoing with finality. Your pension is stripped. Your severance is voided for cause. And my legal team will be handing over the evidence of your kickbacks to the district attorney by noon. You aren't just losing your job. You are going to federal prison. No, God. No, please. Brenda screamed, breaking down into loud, hysterical sobs. Falling to her knees right there on the plush carpet, she reached out toward me, her manicured nails clawing at the air. I'm sorry. I'll pay for your mother. I'll do anything. Please don't do this to me. I didn't even blink. I picked up a phone on the conference table and hit the speed dial for security. Less than 30 seconds later, the boardroom doors swung open again. It was the exact same two massive security guards Brenda had tried to call on me just 2 days ago. They stepped into the room, looking confused at the sight of their chief administrator sobbing hysterically on the floor. Gentlemen, I commanded, pointing a single, manicured finger at the pathetic, sobbing mess on the floor. This woman is trespassing on my property. Remove her from the building immediately. Par. Sept. The new reality and outro. The two massive security guards stood frozen for a fraction of a second, their eyes darting from me to the sobbing woman on the floor, and then over to Mr. Sterling for confirmation. The chief financial officer, still trembling violently, just vigorously nodded his head, looking like he was about to pass out. You heard the chairman, Sterling Barke, his voice cracking. Get her out of here. Now the guards stepped forward. They grabbed Brenda by the arms. Hauling her up from the plush Persian carpet, she thrashed wildly, her expensive crimson blazer wrinkling, her perfectly hairsprayed hair now a chaotic, tangled mess. The heavy, dark streaks of mascara running down her cheeks made her look like a deranged raccoon. No, please. I have kids. I have a mortgage. Brenda shrieked, her voice echoing off the mahogany walls as the guards dragged her backward toward the heavy double doors. Her designer heels scuffed uselessly against the floorboards. Miss Davis, I beg of you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Save it for the federal prosecutor. Brenda, I replied coldly, not breaking eye contact as the guards hauled her out into the hallway. The heavy doors swung shut, abruptly cutting off her hysterical wails. The silence that fell over the grand boardroom was absolute letters. 11 of the most powerful, wealthy men in the city sat absolutely petrified, staring at me, as if I held the power of life and death in my hands. And in a way, within these walls, I did. I slowly pulled out the high-backed leather chair at the head of the table, the chairman's seat, and sat down. I folded my hands over the gold-embossed Vanguard legal folder, projecting an aura of absolute, terrifying calm. Now I said, my voice echoing clearly in the dead quiet room, let's talk about the new direction of Oak Ridge Premium Healthcare. The former chairman swallowed hard, sinking lower into his seat. Mr. Sterling practically had his notebook out, his pen hovering, ready to document my every syllable, like it was sacred scripture. First, I instructed, looking directly at Sterling, I want an immediate, comprehensive audit of the entire billing department. Every single account that Brenda flagged for aggressive collection or asset seizure is to be frozen immediately. Call off the debt collectors. Call off the eviction lawyers. Yes, Miss Davis. Immediately. Sterling stammered, frantically writing it down. Second, I continued, leaning forward. Run a demographic sweep on our current patient registry. Any patient who falls below the poverty line, or whose household income is under $60,000 a year. I want their accounts zeroed out. The boardroom collectively gasped. One of the older executives at the far end of the table nervously raised a hand. Ms. Davis. With all due respect. Mom. That represents a massive chunk of our receivables. You are talking about wiping out roughly $42. Ooh, ling 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 ling. 0 inches outstanding medical debt. I smiled. It was a genuine, relaxed smile. I don't care if it's 42 million or 400 million. I stated smoothly, leaning back in my chair. I own 51% of this facility. And my personal net worth is currently climbing by roughly $2 million a week in raw lithium royalties alone. We are no longer in the business of terrorizing poor families to hit your quarterly bonus targets. Cancel the debt. Forgive it all. Consider it my first philanthropic tax write-off. Nobody dared to argue. The executives just furiously nodded their heads in unanimous, terrified agreement. An hour later, I stepped out of the private VIP elevator and walked into the penthouse recovery suite. The transformation from our tiny, drafty apartment above the loud laundromat to this palatial suite was mind-bending. The room was massive, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a private living room for guests, and a 2-4-hour dedicated nursing staff. The air smelled of fresh orchids, not bleach. My mother was lying in a state-of-the-art, ultra-plush medical bed. The heavy, restrictive plastic oxygen tubes she usually wore had been replaced by a sleek, top-of-the-line, whisper-quiet concentrator system. When she saw me walk in, wearing a pristine Tom Ford suit instead of my ragged Goodwill sweater, her eyes went wide with confusion and awe. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her voice stronger than it had been in months. What is all this? The nurses. They moved me up here an hour ago. They said the bill was paid. Where did you get these clothes?" I walked over, sitting on the edge of her bed, and gently took her frail hand in mine. For the first time in over 8 months, I didn't feel the crushing, suffocating weight of poverty pressing down on my chest. I felt light. I felt entirely, wonderfully free. "It's a long story, Mom," I whispered, tears of profound relief finally welling up in my eyes. I kissed her knuckles softly. "But you don't ever have to worry about money again. You just focus on getting better. We are safe. We are finally safe." My mother didn't understand the details yet, but she saw the absolute truth in my eyes. She pulled me into a hug, crying tears of pure joy into my shoulder. The nightmare was officially over. 6 months have passed since that day in the boardroom. My life now is unrecognizable. The lithium mine in Nevada exceeded all geological expectations, making Atlas Global Mining Corporation incredibly wealthy, and making me a certified billionaire. I moved my mother into a sprawling, gated estate overlooking the ocean, complete with a private staff of world-class physicians who monitor her recovery. I spend my days managing my philanthropic foundation, ensuring that no family in my city ever has to choose between buying groceries and buying life-saving medication. Oakridge Premium Healthcare is now the highest-rated medical facility in the country, renowned for its incredible patient care and charitable wings. And as for Brenda, her life took a very different, deeply poetic turn after my legal team handed over the audit of her fraudulent kickbacks to the district attorney. Brenda was indicted on multiple federal charges of wire fraud and corporate extortion. Her assets were seized to pay restitution to the families she ruined. The woman who once wore designer suits and bragged about making sick people homeless was completely, financially erased. While she awaits her federal trial, she had to find employment to pay for her public defender. Due to her blacklisting in the corporate world, she only had one option. Every once in a while, I drive my matte black Range Rover past a certain greasy spoon diner downtown. I look through the neon-lit window at 4:30 inches the morning, and there she is, Brenda, wearing a scratchy, stained blue uniform, smelling permanently of stale fryer grease, carrying heavy trays of bacon and eggs for grumpy truckers who leave her pocket change as a tip. She scrubs the same floors I used to scrub. She counts the same pennies I used to count. And she knows, every single day, that her miserable reality is a direct result of her own cruelty. It is the most satisfying cup of karma I have ever witnessed. So that is the story of how a girl eating 9-9 Sent ramen accidentally became a lithium billionaire and bought a hospital just to fire her worst enemy. Let me ask you, what would you do if you woke up tomorrow with $312 million in your bank account? Who is the first person you would seek revenge on? And who is the first person you would help? Let me know your master plans in the comments down below. And if you loved watching Brenda get exactly what she deserved, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Until next time, stay rich, stay humble, and never underestimate the quiet ones.